to our session today on Let's Code Together. My name is Dr. Samina Qureshi, and I'm an International Medical Officer with the MSSO. So I, along with my colleague Nicole Fornerato, will be your instructors today. Nicole, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Nicole Fornerato, and I'm a clinical associate with the MSSO for the last 4 years now. I'm based in northern New Jersey in the New York City area. And today, I'm happy to say I'm coming to you from a beautiful spring day here in New Jersey. I always like to give a little weather report. But anyway, looking forward to working through some coding examples with you today and with Samina as well.
Thank you. Now, in addition to Nicole and myself, we are going to be joined by Hannah Eaton, who will help facilitate today's webinar. Now, in order to be interactive with you, we are going to be using the PollEV software. The instructions to join, as Hannah has already mentioned, are in the chat section of the GoToMeeting control panel. Now, at various points in the presentation, I will prompt you to join and log in so that you can participate in the exercise, in the coding exercises. Okay, so as well, I'd like to share with you that the Q&A portion is intended to answer questions about the specific principles we discussed today, and it's not intended for general coding questions. We will also be using the Medra browser for exercises and have provided you a training ID and password to use today temporarily in case you don't remember your own. The information for that temporary training ID and password is also in the chat section of the control panel. I also want to remind you at the very outset that this session is for 90 minutes, and in case we don't get through with all 6 exercises, we will carry them over to the next session of the Let's Code Together English webinar. Okay, so I would also just before we begin, because we have a wide and varied audience with various varied backgrounds, some are seniors, are very pros, others are beginners, I'd like to just provide a brief framework and background on MEDRA. MEDRA, as most of you know, is an acronym which stands for the Medical Dictionary for Regulatory Activities. It is an ICH initiative, and the ICH stands for the International Council for Harmonization. So the ICH adopted the development of MEDRA in about the mid-1990s. And since MEDRA is a living, breathing, and ever-evolving terminology, the ICH appointed the MSSO, or the MEDRA Maintenance and Support Services Organization, various tasks. One of these tasks is to maintain and further develop the terminology, and this is primarily done based on user feedback. As well as we have the task to provide training, such as the one today. As well, we also administer MEDRA licenses. Now, all of these MSSO activities are overseen by the ICH's MEDRA Management Committee, and this is in turn composed of various industry as well as regulatory bodies, with the WHO acting as an observer. Okay, so the next slide. So before we begin, most of you veterans out there know that we are required to read and review all of this disclaimer notice, even though it's very verbose. So I'll try my best to summarize it as best as I can. So the very first bullet basically talks about the fact that MEDRA is owned by the ICH. Also, all of the material that we present today is copyrighted material and also owned by the ICH. Now, aside from the logos, all of the material that we present today can be used by you in your organization with the appropriate acknowledgement. Now, in case you modify anything in the material in any way, you must make a specific disclaimer and acknowledge that those changes are in no way supported by the ICH and they are your own. And the second bullet is basically saying that the presentation is provided as is without warranty of any kind. In no event shall the ICH or the authors of the original presentation be liable for any claim, damages, or other liability arising from the use of the presentation. And thankfully, the third bullet is not relevant for us today because it talks about third-party material, and we don't have any third-party material today. So let's go on to the next slide. Okay, so at the very outset, before we begin the presentation, I just want to establish a few points. First of all, we would like to share with you that you are able to ask questions during the presentation. For example, I'm talking about a particular concept and you have a question. You are free to ask that question in the question panel in your GoToMeeting. Now, as well, it's very important due to the nature of this type of presentation, there may be examples where you don't agree with a selection of the coding choices, but let's just at the outset agree to disagree. Specific coding requests, for example, you have a specific question on something you encountered during your work, and that's very challenging, and you would like to know how to address that. This is not the session for that. We can't take any specific coding requests. However, we are happy to discuss questions about the examples that we're presenting. So after the session, we will have ample time. We will provide you a Q&A session, as well as an opportunity to propose new coding questions for our next session on Let's Code Together. Oftentimes, Nicole and I take examples that are suggested from audiences like you today, and we incorporate them into subsequent Let's Code Together sessions. Okay, so now that that's established, let's go on to the next slide. Here, these are instructions on how to join the Poll Everywhere application, and this is going to allow you to give your coding choices, and participate actively in the coding questions that we have today. So you use the URL www.pollev.com/NICOLEF. So Nicole has been kind enough to share her credentials. Then once you connect or you're on that URL, you don't need to enter a username. Just go to the next screen. Just to remind you, all of your answers are anonymous, so don't be shy. Do type in your suggestions for the coding answers. Next slide, please. And here, for those of you who are equipped with a smartphone, this is a shortcut way. Just use this QR code in your smart phone camera, and it'll take you directly to the PollEV site. Okay, so we will repeat these instructions throughout the session whenever we want you to answer. So please, if you can flash the previous slide again, so people can use their camera to log into PollEV, so we can all participate together in this very first PollEV question: where are you from? Okay, so everyone use this QR code as well as the URL, which is also in the chat section, to log into PollEV, so we can just test to see if you can log in successfully and answer the very first question: where are you from? Okay, looks like people are successfully logged in. And Nicole and I will test our geography skills. So lots of people coming in from US.
And I should mention, Samina, right? This is one of my favorite slides polls of the whole day, because I like to see where everyone's from and what a diverse audience we have role-wise, and just where are they from, all the different areas. So it looks like, oh, we're getting everywhere now.
Yeah, we have Africa, we have India, we have, let's see, we have Europe, lots of people in Europe, someone in the water still, you know, and we have, I think, Canada too.
Yeah.
So we have an international audience. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll give a couple more seconds for this, and then we'll go back to the presentation.
Sure.
Just make sure this.
Australia, Nicole, look at that.
Wow. That's great. All over. Very nice.
So good. I'm very pleased to see that people can log in. And so if you are successful logging in now, you will also be able to log in a similar fashion for our upcoming coding questions that we have. And so I guess then people are logged in from various time zones as well. So in some places like us, we're in the East Coast, it's morning, 11 a.m. And for others, it might be night. So, you know, all types of time zones represented.
Yeah, it's awesome. Very nice. All right. So it looks like this is working, Samina. So I'm going to go back to the presentation and let you get started.
Thank you. Okay, so now that we are successfully able to log into the PollEV app, let me just, for your benefit, let you just review the various types of Medra browsers that are available that you can use to go along with us and perform these searches for the various coding terms. You can use the Medra desktop browser. You can as well use the Medra web-based browser, which I'm partial to, as well as for looking for terms, you can also use the mobile Medra browser. And for each of these, you have the URLs. And then we also have temporary login credentials in the chat section of the control panel in case you've forgotten your own login credentials. And here is right here is the username you can use, the temporary username for today's session, as well as the temporary password highlighted in yellow for you. And here's also a URL on how to access the Medra web-based browser. Now for a shortcut, you can also go to our medra.org website. And as the screenshot shows you and the red arrows pointing, once you go into the home page of our website, and here Nicole is doing that, at the very top where you see the little hand is WBB stands for web-based browser. It'll directly take you to your web-based browser. Okay, so various ways to get to the Medra web-based browser if you want to use that for today's exercises. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. Now let's start out with how to approach various medical coding challenges that we will be presenting to you today. So it's very important to realize, and I think some of you out there who are coders certainly know, that an exact match term isn't always available. So you are supposed to use at that time the next closest term that is available in Medra using your medical judgment. And of course, there are various approaches people take. You know, one coder may think differently from another coder, and that's why we don't always 100% may agree with what specific term is the final answer for some of these exercises. Now, I would like to mention that the Medra points to consider document for term selection is a great reference. This is a reference that you should use or should be used to provide a framework for you to develop your own internal coding guidelines. And this has various options depending on the nature of data in your organization. It has a preferred option on how to approach various coding challenges, as well as an alternate option. So depending on your specific scenario within your organization and the type of data you have, you can use either of those approaches for your internal coding guidelines. And of course, interpreting data is extremely important. You should always only take that information which is provided to you. Don't make assumptions and add extra information, but on the same token, don't exclude information that is provided to you in a given verbatim. So it's very important to be very precise and capture exactly that which is being reported. Okay, so now that we agree to disagree on the various approaches that one may take, let's go on to the next slide. And here I'd like you again to log in, make sure you're connected and log into PollEV as we start with our very first exercise. Okay, so let's code together. Okay, so get your PollEV ready and let's go through and see how to approach this first example. So the first example, the verbatim, is in the blue box, and it is, she developed a Disney rash on her legs after hiking all day and had a headache because her hair was in a ponytail all day. So it's very interesting what's been proposed. So let's dissect it and sort of look at it. What is the verbatim trying to convey to us? What exactly is being reported? So if I'm new to Medra, I want to sort of get an idea what type of event or what type of concept is being represented here. How should I approach this verbatim string, and which socks will I be potentially looking in order to find these particular things that have been reported? So I'm going to break this down and make sure you also look at the temporal relationship and the sequence of things that are happening. So first of all, she developed a Disney rash. Where did she develop it? On her legs. So she developed a Disney rash on her legs. And when did this happen? It happened after she was hiking all day. Then the second part of the narrative says in addition, she had a headache. And then it gives you the cause, the headache. It gives you information about why the headache or details about the headache. She had a headache because her hair was in a ponytail all day. So I assume that means it was all pulled back and with a band or a hair application, and it was tied back in a ponytail. Okay, so I have this sort of verbatim. I'm sort of looking at how to approach it. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. Okay, so when you, in the PollEV, I want you to, we have the copy of the verbatim string. What would you code with, given this verbatim? She developed a Disney rash on her legs after hiking all day and had a headache because her hair was in a ponytail all day. So I want everyone to log into PollEV just like you did for the first exercise and give us your thoughts on what codes, what LLTs you would use. Okay, so some people said headache. They got the second portion of the verbatim. They want to represent that with headache. What else? What about the first portion where she got a Disney rash? How would you approach that? And make sure that you check in your browser that those are actual terms. So Disney rash, we're going to go later in the browser and see if that term actually exists. Make sure there are existing current LLT that you're choosing. Okay, this needs to be split. Headache for the latter, query the first part for clarification. So someone would just choose headache for the second part, but they need more information for the first, okay? Other people would code it as rash legs, okay? Some good approaches. Okay, so the majority of people are capturing headache and rash. And some people said rash legs. Other people would query. Okay, so someone said something else. They gave a specific type of headache and they gave it, okay. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. Excellent, excellent, interesting answers. So let's see how I would approach this. Okay, so let's go to the next slide and here. So what I did is, and what someone did very quickly, I was very pleased to see that. When I type in the browser, I'll let you know, when I typed in Disney rash, there is no such LLT currently in the browser. So I used my references because I am supposed to use my medical judgment, right? And I'm not very familiar with what a Disney rash is. So I went in online and I looked up Disney rash, and one of my health references, Healthline, told me that Disney rash is a condition known as exercise-induced vasculitis. Okay, and then I go on to read it in more detail. A Disney rash is not the souvenir you had in mind, but many visitors to Disneyland and other amusement parks find that they get it. The medical name for Disney rash is exercise-induced vasculitis. The condition is also called golfer's rash, hiker's rash, and golfer's vasculitis. It's a combination of hot weather, sunlight exposure, and prolonged periods of walking. Okay, so now this reference has very clearly told me an alternate name, or the medical name for Disney rash is exercise-induced vasculitis. So let's go to the next page or to the browser. I'm going to go in my handy dandy browser, Medra browser, and Nicole is going to show that. And she's going to type in, since our reference told us that this is an alternate name for Disney rash, which is sort of a layman's term for exercise-induced vasculitis. Let me just put in partially exercise, E-X-E-R, and vasculitis, V-A-S. Good. Let's see what I can get for that. Okay, so I got exactly the medical term for which they told me that Disney rash is called. So I'm going to highlight the PT, which is cutaneous vasculitis. I'm going to highlight the PT and go to the browser to see all the LLTs under that PT. That may be a closer fit to what's been reported. Okay, when I open up that PT, cutaneous vasculitis, on the left-hand side, I see all these LLTs. And lo and behold, exactly what my reference said. It's also referred to as golfer's vasculitis, exercise-induced vasculitis. So my thought process tells me, since Disney rash, the exact match is not there, I'll use the medical alternative for that, which is exercise-induced vasculitis based on my reference, and I'm going to use that LLT. So that's my thought process. So someone did put in the poll EV exercise-induced vasculitis, so that's very good. So that takes care of the first part of my verbatim. How would I handle the second part where they said she got a headache because her hair was tied back in a ponytail? So let me go in my references on the next slide. Okay, and I'm going to see what is exactly a ponytail headache. I mean, is that something that, comes up? Okay, so in my reference, so the previous slide, in my reference, I want to know, so is there a headache that can be caused by, tying your hair in a ponytail? It's a long shot, but let me just look it up. And lo and behold, my medical reference does have something. What to know about headaches from a ponytail. And as I read this, in the interest of time, it basically tells me a headache from a ponytail likely occurs due to compression against the head. And then as I read further, it tells me existing research refers to this type of headache in the following medical terms. Okay, external compression headache, external pressure headache, external traction headache, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in my browser again and see. So let me see what the medical term was. Since the medical term is saying, let me look up external compression because that's one of the medical terms they said. So I'll do external compression and look that up. Is there such a term, the medical term that my reference said? So yes, external compression headache is there. Let me see what PT is there. Okay, so I'm going to go on the PT where it resides, external compression headache. I'm going to highlight it, go to browser, and the left-hand side will show me all the LLTs under this PT. So when I look at all the LLTs, I see external compression headache, external traction headache, and very surprisingly, I see an exact match, ponytail headache. This is exactly what's been described in my little narrative string. So I would ideally try to find the best, closest match to that which has been reported. So I will use this LLT, ponytail headache, for my LLT choice. So if I go to the next slide on this. Okay, so we found the external headache. So my final suggestions for this, and someone did get this right in the poll EV. My first choice would be exercise-induced vasculitis for the Disney rash. And my exact match for the headache, because her hair was in a ponytail, it's a ponytail headache. So these are my two final choices. And some person did get that right. Excellent. Kudos to whoever got that right. These are all anonymous, so we can't give credit to any specific person because we don't know who answered the correct choice. So any questions up to this point for our first exercise?
I am not seeing any questions in the chat yet.
Okay, very good. So let's move on to the second example. Okay, so in this one, the patient received eye drops and later developed a severe gonococcal eye infection. Cultures of unopened containers of the drops grew the gonococcal bacteria. So a lot of information here. And remember, it's very important to see the sequence of events sometimes. It's very important to keep that temporal relationship in your mind in case there's a specific term. And of course, we cannot, at the very outset, we said, make sure to capture everything that which has been reported. Don't add information that's not there. Don't make assumptions, as well as don't subtract or leave out information or facts that have been given to you. So here, let's break this down. I would look at many things that have happened here. The patient received eye drops, so we know they've got eye drops in their eyes, and they developed a gonococcal eye infection. So they got an eye infection, which is specifically a gonococcal one. Then additional facts are provided to me. They're telling me that cultures of the unopened container of the drops, so the drops that she got, they took a culture of those drops. It grew gonococcal bacteria. So that leads me to think there's something wrong with the medicine or the drops themselves because the unopened container grew an organism, gonococcal bacteria. So let's go to keeping this in mind, all of the facts and the sequence of events. Let's go to our poll EV and see what you think. How would you code this? So this is exercise number 2. So here's the verbatim. Think of all the information that's provided and what are all the LLTs you would use. Okay, so someone said gonococcal eye infection, product contamination, microbial. Okay, I'm happy to see that people didn't just write eye infection. They gave the organism because there's a term for that. Okay, what are other facts in there? What was additional information that was given to me? So eye infection, gonococcal, I'll just give you an answer that's true. That there is such an LLT, eye infection, gonococcal. Very smart of you all to keep the organism in there since there is a term. Okay, so some people are actually going on the right path. They're kind of looking at something about the product itself. Okay, few more minutes. So some people have picked up on the fact that there's something wrong with the product. And then we even told you what it grew, what kind of culture it grew. It grew the gonococcal bacteria. Okay. Excellent. Very good. All right, so let's go to our slide and show you how I would approach this. Since we're coding together, I'm going to tell you my approach. So let's go to the browser. And actually, before we go to the browser, I'm sorry, Nicole, the reference. So I wanted to learn a little bit about, and how I would arrive at eye infection gonococcal. First of all, I just wanted to do a little research. It's always good to make sure that your coding choice is medically accurate and that your medical judgment is based on facts. So never hesitate to look up things, check your medical references, as in the example here. I looked up to see how often and what kind of infection, a gonococcal eye infection, how it's described. And just very briefly, I see that yes, the gonococcal eye infection can be caused by gonococcal bacteria, and that they are most often, if not treated properly, can result in blindness. Most often it infects the eyes of infants born to mothers, yet it can also infect the eyes of adults. So that basically provides me some medical background that yes, this bacteria can cause an eye infection. Then I go to my browser. Okay, and then I just to get a very accurate term, I look up eye infection, a brief eye, and then INF infection, and then maybe I try to see that particular bacteria, gono, G-O-N-O, just to see, and that there you go, because I know that organism, so I just tried to look for it, and I did actually get lucky, and there's a specific term, eye infection gonococcal, and you can do any order. You can do gonococcal infection of eye, but I'll choose eye infection gonococcal for my first LLT choice. That's where the eye infection was, and it was used to the bacteria. Okay, so another thing that I found that some people did pick up on is that the eye drops themselves grew bacteria, right? So there was some contamination. Let me look up just the term contamination. Okay, and then I see there's so many contamination terms: exposure to contaminated air, food contamination. So what other thing I can do is I can do a sometimes you can do a top bottom search, sometimes you can do a bottom to top search. So I'll go very broadly. I'm going to check in my SOC product issues because there's something wrong with the product. So I'm going to go to my SOC product issues. And when I see my SOC product issues, I see that the product issue SOC, which was relatively new SOC, it was added in version 19.0. It only has two HLGT. One is device issues and another HLGT that specifically has to do with product quality. So I'm looking for something wrong with my product. So let me open up that HLGT, product quality, supply, distribution. Okay, when I open that up, and this is if I'm not familiar, I'm a novice to Medra, and I want to sort of search where exactly I'm looking for my particular issue. So once I open up the HLGT product issues, I'm going to look for a specific HLT having to do with contamination. There it is, product contamination. Let me open that up. I look that up, but then when I go lower, I see there's a specific issue, product contamination microbial, and this is something I'm interested in. Let's open that up because my product grew gonorrhea, right? It's a type of bacteria. And here I see exactly what I'm looking for in the LLT, product contamination bacterial. And that's the second LLT I would choose, which someone very rightly picked in the poll EV. I did see someone pick that LLT, so very good. So that's two LLTs. However, so when we look at the verbatim again, we see that we captured the eye infection, right, gonococcal. We captured the fact that there was a microbial contamination of the product. See, some people got that. There's another aspect that I'd like to think about. So if we can go to the next slide, I think I have where I opened up. Yeah, here's the slide after this one. Yeah, here's just briefly showing you how we went about looking in the browser by opening the product issue SOC and looking at the specific HLT and looking for our contamination term. So we got that product contamination microbial. Good. So let's also think about in the browser, something else happened. How did the person get their eye infection? They got it from the contaminated eye drops. So there's another concept, third concept that no one thought of yet. They basically got the eye infection. It was transmitted. So let's look at transmitted in our browser. Because the eye infection, he didn't just get up one day and get an eye infection. He got it after he put the eye drops, which were contaminated. So transmitted. So it was transmission. He got an infectious agent transmitted. So let's see, is there any transmission, LLT transmission? Let's put in infectious, because it was something that was infectious that he got. So in our search, let's put transmitted infection and see if there's any term. So here I see, when I look down at all the various LLTs, I see one that exactly fits my scenario: transmission of an infectious agent via product. So this is my third choice. This is how I would approach this exercise. Do not forget the information that the person got an eye infection after he used eye drops, and then the additional information that the eye drops were contaminated. Therefore, there's a transmission concept that we need to capture, and this is adequately done with this LLT. So I'm going to choose this LLT as well. So let's go to our next slide. And here are the final suggestions for our second coding example: transmission of an infectious agent via product. Then, of course, the other two LLT we showed you how to get: the product contamination bacterial, and of course, the fact that the person had an eye infection, gonococcal. So let's see if we have any questions thus far.
I am not seeing any questions submitted.
Super. Okay, so let's go to our third example. So here, again, we have to dissect and make sure we capture all information that has been provided to us. Here we're talking about the new device had voice instructions for using the device, but he could barely hear them. So he decided not to use the prescribed device. So there's a new device that has voice instructions, but they're not so clear, or they're not loud enough, or there's some issue with the voice instructions such that it's hard to hear. So because he couldn't hear the voice instructions from the new device, he decided not to use the prescribed device. So I'm looking at this very carefully and making sure I'm taking into account the sequence of events. So what it was caused by what. So here it's an issue with the device. It's some sort of device issue. So what could he barely hear? He could barely hear the voice instructions of the device. And what happened as a result of that? Because he couldn't hear it, he decided not to use the prescribed device. All right, so let's go into the poll EV for the third question and see what people think. What would they choose? Okay, so let's see everyone go into poll EV and type in what you think for this particular exercise. Okay, so people did realize that they have to pick some sort of issue with the device, and we're going to try to get as specific as we can. Okay, voice instructions difficult to hear, device audio issue. Okay, wow, so people are very well versed with using the browser. Okay, and then also, so suppose you get the first part, something you report with an LLT. Well, what happened as a result? He decided not to use the prescribed device. We have to capture that information as well. Okay, so we are getting very good choices for the fact that the device had voice instructions that were barely audible. Okay, what about the fact that he decided not to use the prescribed device? So let's go to the next slide, and I'll show you how this next slide has a view of the browser. Okay, so here again, I want to know I want to hone in on which sock I'm going to look for. I know it's something wrong with the device. So I again go to my sock product issues and I see there's two HLGT, right? And the previous example, we used the HLGT for product quality. This time it has something to do with device issues. So on the right-hand side, I opened up all the HLT to show you and to illustrate to you all the HLT under the HLGT device issues. And then, of course, I similarly opened up everything under the product. But for this particular exercise, I'm going to hone in on the product issues part. Okay, so on the next slide, we go more further detail into the device issues HLGT. Okay, and here I'm showing you that it's some sort of malfunction, right? He can't hear the voice instructions. And as we scroll down, I look under more detail on all the PTs available under the HLT device malfunction events not elsewhere classified, or NEC. And here under device audio issue, I see all the various LLT. And in my opinion, the LLT that most precisely reflects the issue at hand is voice instructions difficult to hear, right? So the voice instructions were difficult to hear. This is the closest match to the verbatim that I'm given. So in my opinion, I would use voice instructions difficult to hear. Okay. And what about the second part? He didn't go he did not use the device because he couldn't hear it. So I want people to think what they would choose. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the various treatment. Let me see for treatment. He didn't do something that he was prescribed, right? He was supposed to use the device, but he didn't use it. So he was basically non-compliant. So let me look up treatment non-compliant, or under treatment, what is there? Okay, so here under treatment non, we did a partial search. I find what I'm looking for, treatment non-compliance. Basically, he didn't use the device. So he didn't comply with the fact that he had to use it. Okay, so that's, in my opinion, that's what I would use. So let's go to the final slide. Okay, and the final suggestions, one person got it in the poll EV I saw, voice instructions difficult to hear. That's what I would pick for the first part of the example. And for the second part, in my opinion, I would use treatment non-compliance, basically to represent that he didn't use the prescribed device or the prescribed treatment. Okay, so someone did get treatment non-compliance. Excellent, very good. So Nicole, I see that people are really very adept at using the browser and also looking for the exact match LLT. Excellent. Any questions for this third example?
I am not seeing any questions. We've got some coding pros.
Yes, we do. Excellent, excellent job. So I will now hand over to Nicole for her fourth example.
Okay, thank you, Samina. Oh, I forgot to do your little graphic at the end, but there it is. All right, so we'll move on to example 4. So she experienced dizziness, extreme fatigue, and arrhythmia after her holiday to an exotic island where she ate grapefruit juice for breakfast every morning. All right, so what do we have here? So is the verbatim clear? I'd say there's a couple clear things in there for sure. We have to break down kind of what is being reported here. Is there an anatomical site listed? And then we think about kind of when we go through this process, right? Like what is the most appropriate LLT or LLTs that should be used in this example? And another thing is, do we need to split this term, right? So as we go through the normal process, let's break it down a little bit further. So what do we know about this example? So she experienced dizziness. We know the patient did that. Then we know that there are multiple symptoms listed, right? Extreme fatigue, arrhythmia. We know that the person was traveling, the patient. She was traveling because it says clearly here in the example, after her holiday to an exotic island where she ate grapefruit for breakfast every morning, right? And then the third thing that we know here is that I put drank, but consumed grapefruit juice every morning while she was away on holiday, right? So those are the things that we know, right? So with that being said, I'm going to open up the poll, and I would like to see initially, what do you think, what are your initial thoughts around what should be coded here? So she experienced dizziness, extreme fatigue, and arrhythmia after her holiday, where she ate, drank, consumed, I should have just put consumed, grapefruit for breakfast every morning. So what do you think? Use the browser and kind of see what you can come up with. And obviously here you're gonna have multiple LLTs, so you can list them all out. Okay, there we go. All right, we got some dizziness, fatigue, arrhythmia, food interaction. All right. Multiple LLTs. Somebody would like to see a query issued on this to come up with a diagnosis. Okay, food interaction. Travel to a tropical country. Wonder if we have that in Medra. I don't think we have the exact term, but they did indeed travel, so that is something you should keep in mind. Arrhythmia, accepting dizziness, fatigue as common symptoms. Oh, very interesting. Coming up with all different responses here. Multiple LLTs, dizziness, extreme fatigue, arrhythmia. All right, I'll give everyone a little more time since we have plenty of time left today. We'll give you plenty of time to be able to respond to these polls. I actually have multiple polls each exercise, so we'll give plenty of time. Adverse food reaction, very interesting. Okay, foreign travel. Travel to a tropical country. Why are you doing that? Okay, we'll just give a little more time. We'll switch back to our slides. While you're all still putting your responses, I'm going to pull up the browser, and I am going to type in travel. So as you can see, we have some foreign travel here. We have travel sickness, travel to a foreign country, travel to a tropical country. Very good. All right, allergic reaction to food, adverse food. We're seeing a lot of food interactions coming here, as well as additional. Okay, so I think now we'll move on to go through the rest of the slides. Let me just get out of this. Okay, so the first thing I would do when I receive a verbatim like this is I would say, okay, I would like to reference this, right? I would like to see what is out there that I can at least get some sort of additional information on. And my first thought would be, I know that grapefruit was juice or was either consumed, drank, or ate on this trip, right? When the person was away. So I would say, I want to look for a reference that will talk about grapefruit juice and maybe medication, right? So I searched the internet and I found the FDA actually has information around grapefruit juice and some medications and how they don't mix, right? So I would use this reference and scroll down and just get additional information. You can see here that grapefruit juice or grapefruit itself in fruit form can be part of a healthy diet, but it also can cause interactions with the way your medications work, right? Drug interactions, they can be a concern. So this is something interesting to keep in mind as you go through this, right? So you can see here, the FDA even provides some examples of types of drugs that interact with grapefruit juice and may cause problems. So there are some statin drugs that, interact, some drugs that treat high blood pressure, organ transplant rejection drugs, even some anti-anxiety drugs, right? Corticosteroids. So the list is even some drugs that treat abnormal heart rhythms. So we do know that part of the symptoms was arrhythmia, right? Also antihistamine. So you could see grapefruit actually can have a very interesting effect on a variety of medications, as we can see from this reference. So just as myself and Samina have been saying, one of the best things you can do is reference. And I would recommend, if you don't internally have a list of solid references or medical dictionaries or medical references that you can go to. That's one of the best things to do when handling medical coding, no matter what your role is within medical coding, to have these references available. It can really help to understand a tricky verbatim that may come in, right? So we see here, okay, so we have some more information around this term. So now I'm going to actually open up a second poll to see, after we referenced the grapefruit juice, or the grapefruit and medication, I mean, did the referencing change your mind on how you would handle this term? Yes or no? So let's see. Some people already had a piece of the, information available with food interaction or adverse reaction to food, etc. Okay, so 80% already realized that maybe that piece would have an effect on how things would be coded, right? All right, I'll give a little more time here for everyone to answer. And okay, it looks like the poll is done. So we will go back to the slides. Okay, so with that being said, here are my final suggestions for this term. So she experienced dizziness, extreme fatigue, and arrhythmia after her holiday to an exotic island where she consumed grapefruit for breakfast every morning. So a lot of you had this correct. The dizziness would go to dizziness, extreme fatigue. We have an LLT of fatigue extreme, and then arrhythmia. Now, some people did mention that they would query for a diagnosis. That is something I know Samina mentioned earlier, the PTC, the points to consider. That's something you can develop a guideline for internally. If you have symptoms like this and you think that you would prefer a diagnosis with these 3 symptoms, you think they may be linked in some fashion, you can definitely issue a query to get a common diagnosis, right? In the meantime, you do have these three symptoms available, and you can code them, right? And if you do end up querying, you could see if you get a diagnosis, and if the diagnosis comes back, then obviously the diagnosis would be coded, and the symptoms would become part of the diagnosis if they are all indeed linked. However, we do not know that. So right now they're standalone. It could just be a coincidence. It could be something in the medical history that this patient had. We do not know anything. So we don't know if a diagnosis should even be had at this point, right? And I did also see one that I left off here was foreign travel to an exotic island, or on here, to a tropical country, I'm sorry, because I put exotic island, which we can consider tropical. So travel to a tropical country. So depending on, again, internally, if you capture that information, it should then indeed be coded, and it can be coded. So it's very good to point out. So Steve, good job, everyone, for picking that up as well. So another final suggestion in this case is, we know that the patient did indeed consume grapefruit juice, right? But however, we should never infer that an actual interaction between their medication and the grapefruit juice or the grapefruit itself did occur, right? So in this case, I would suggest to query to clarify or confirm that there was indeed an interaction that took place. We do not have that information. The verbatim, nowhere in the verbatim does it state that an interaction took place. So we should not infer. So I did put up a screenshot from our points to consider document. And one of the first general guidelines for coding is don't infer information. And this example was just an example basically of how easy it is to take a couple symptoms or a piece of information. And even though we referenced it and we did see, yes, grapefruit juice or grapefruit in general does indeed interact with a bunch of medications, right? The list was actually very long. It's actually quite mind-blowing how many medications grapefruit does interact with it to certain people. But then again, it depends, right? It depends on the person's metabolism. It depends on the type of drug being taken. It depends on a lot of different factors. So we really, just seeing this here, we have to kind of take off that cap that sometimes we wear. And especially if you're a physician and you deal with this a lot, and kind of take yourself outside of it and say, okay, it wasn't actually stated that there was an interaction. So maybe we query to see if they can confirm an interaction, or just if nothing comes back, then obviously we don't have to include that piece. So just something to keep in mind as you go about your coding day to day, because examples like this happen a lot where there's a lot of pieces that can be put together to build a puzzle. However, maybe in some instances that puzzle and the pieces maybe belong to a different puzzle, or just shouldn't all go together to infer something that we don't necessarily know for sure happened. So with that being said, Hannah, are there any questions around this?
I am not seeing any questions.
All right, great. So we will go on to example 5. Okay, so the patient had a fall resulting in a concussion, multiple fractures, a black eye, and swollen arm. The medication was temporarily discontinued. The patient was still taking the medication as scheduled. So what do we have here? Is this verbatim clear? What exactly is being reported? What is the most appropriate LLT or LLTs? Do we need to split it, or do we have kind of confusing information? What's going on here with this patient? Okay, so before I even get into how I would handle it, let's go to a poll and see how you all would handle it. Okay, so I'll activate this and give it your best go. Again, there are multiple things here, so you might want to do a big string, or you can do them individually, whatever you prefer. I'll give plenty of time for people to use the browser and see what you can come up with. All right, we're starting to get some response. And don't forget all the pieces of this, right? Because there's kind of a lot here. And a lot of times this is how terms do come in, especially on the safety side. I know in clinical, a term like this would have to be broken down before it comes into the database, or a query would have to be issued to break it down. But we're looking at this as an example today on a whole. So regardless of what, if you're in clinical or safety, or how you would handle a term like this, say from a database perspective, we're just looking at it from a whole perspective. Okay, so we have swollen arm, fall, oh, concussion. Okay, here we go, multiple fractures, black eye, swollen arm. Okay, give a little more time because I see there's medication discontinued. Great responses coming in. Concussion with brief loss of consciousness. Okay. Multiple fractures. Discontinued product administered, as well as some other LLTs. All right, I'll give everyone a little more time. I'll be quiet for a couple seconds and let you all think. Okay, we're getting lots of different examples. I'm going to keep this poll open so you can feel free to keep Therapy Interrupted, to keep entering as I talk through this, just for interest of time, and just to keep it moving a little bit. Like I said, I'll keep this open swollen ankles, swollen, oh, interesting. Okay. Person caught a lot of different LLTs there. All right. Okay, I'll keep this open and we'll just move on to the next slide just to keep it moving. Okay, so first thing we'll do is break down the terms. So what do we know? We knew the patient had a fall, right? The fall resulted in a concussion. We know that they had multiple fractures. They also had a black eye. The fall also resulted in a swollen arm. So there's a lot of information there. And then we're breaking down the term even further. What else do we know? The medication was temporarily discontinued, but the patient was still taking the medication as scheduled. Very interesting there, conflicting information, if you would say. So let's see. I'm gonna just open one more poll while okay, we're still getting lots of good answers. That's great. Okay, so I just would like to know, did your original LLTs change based off of how the term was broken down? So state yes or no, just so I have an idea of what people are thinking, as well as if from the term being broken down the way it did you have any additional terms you would like to code now? If you say yes, you can feel free to type in also any additional LLTs that maybe you came up with. And again, let me just, I'll keep this open, but I'm gonna go back to the slide to see, okay, so this is the part I was speaking about, or both parts actually. So you can see I broke it down into kind of individual terms here, or individual concepts that may, be used together when coding. So let's see. No, other than under normal circumstances, take more time to think it through more. Yeah. Okay, you can definitely, that is true, because right now we're just, we only have an hour here today, or an hour and a half. So maybe a term like this you would sit on for a day or a couple hours, talk to your colleagues about it, do some researching. So that's a good point. Yes, query for the second part. Okay. Product dose emission, intentional product use issue. Okay, we're getting lots and lots of different terms. And some advice too here, because yeah, maybe under a different circumstance where you're not in a training class, you would, sit on that and take your time and really think about what should be done with it. Talk to other people. So, okay, I'll keep this poll open a little bit longer. We'll see here if anything else comes through. A bunch of people said no, so they might have had everything covered in the first poll, or okay, query treatment non-compliance. Okay, so it looks like this poll is slowing down, so I will continue on and provide you with my final suggestions. So the patient had a fall resulting in concussion, multiple fractures, black eye, swollen arm. Again, the medication was temporarily discontinued, but the patient was still taking the medication as scheduled. So you could see here, we have fall, concussion, multiple fractures, black eye, and swollen arm. In this case, we always recommend splitting out a fall from the rest of signs and symptoms, as well as a motor vehicle accident, right? So you want to capture that fall individually, right? In case you're internally, you look at to see whether the medication may have caused the fall or a motor vehicle accident, things like that. So it's important to separate out the fall and then also capture what happened as a result of the fall. And then the patient was still taking the medication as scheduled. Here, I put it to LLT, failure to suspend the medication, because it was discontinued, right? However, they were still taking it as scheduled, which was a failure to suspend the medication. I also saw in there discontinued product administered, which also can be used, but in this case, not only was it administered, there was a failure to suspend it. So they were supposed to discontinue the medication. However, when they went to the site, or however the patient was taking the medication, they were still taking it as scheduled. So there was a failure to suspend the medication. So with that being said, are there any questions around this example, Hannah? Let me go back in here and look.
I am not seeing any questions yet in the question pane.
All right, good. Okay, great. So we're going to move on to our final example of the day, example 6. Okay, so this one is interesting. So it just says incapacitated, which led to a suspension in work. So what would you do with this term? How would you handle it? What does that mean? The only thing, we know here, we know somebody was incapacitated, and then we also know that they could no longer work. So what do we do? Let's open up the poll and see what you exactly would do. Let's see how everyone would handle this. I opened up the poll, so give it your best go. You could search the browser. All right, unevaluable event. Okay. And also don't forget, you could also, maybe you do need to issue a query if you think, see what you need to do. Okay, inability to work. All right, we're getting some responses in now. A lot of unevaluable event. Ability, okay, very interesting. All different types of responses here for this one. This is very interesting to see what people are coming up with. Paired workability. All right. Difficulty in working. Okay, that is true. If you can't work, there's difficulty. All right, give a little more time for everyone to search the browser. Disability. Okay, very interesting. So we're getting lots and lots of different types of responses here. I love that. We're such a, we have people from all over, all different fields of work, I'm sure, and all different types of how you go about handling something. It's very interesting, which makes medical coding so interesting in itself. Physical disability, loss of employment. Oh, okay, and query. Ability to work, okay. Loss of employment and query to confirm reason. Okay. All right, so it looks like the poll is slowing down. So I will go to my next slide. All right, so the first thing again that I always try to do is a little referencing. Sorry, this slide looks like a lot of words, really big on the slide. But I just wanted to provide, after a little searching, and again, you can use whatever reference your internal organization recommends to kind of search this concept and see what you come up with. But incapacitation basically refers to the state of being unable to make informed and rational decisions due to physical or mental impairments, right? So this can result from various causes, including unconsciousness, sleep, alcohol, or drug intoxication, various medical conditions. So when a person is incapacitated, they may lose the ability to understand even what their medical condition is. So they might not even know that they're having a medical condition, right? So the benefits and harms of proposed treatments and their ability to communicate effectively. So basically, they may not understand what's going on or what to do or what would happen, so it's kind of a very interesting state of being, right? So now that we have our referencing, what I will do is I will go to the browser and we can search around a little bit, because this one is a very interesting topic, right? So based off of what was just referenced, I would suggest searching the browser as follows to see what's available. So maybe we did see a little bit about mental. So maybe we check, see if there's any mental awareness type terms available. Nope, it's not coming up. So maybe we just do mental and see what we come across, right? This is one way how I would like mental disorder, mental confusion. One way how I would start to search this term, right? Mental function decreased, mental fatigue. There's lots of different things available in MedDRA, lots of different terms to capture lots of different concepts around that, right? So the next thing I would maybe look for is I would search for a mental, maybe just type disorder specifically, right? Okay, we see here we have mental disorder due to a general medical condition. Okay, maybe based off our referencing, maybe we're getting a little closer, right? We also have mental disorder not otherwise specified due to a general medical condition, post-organic brain damage, lots of different options available here in the browser. Okay, so we say, okay, well, these they might work, they might not, right? But at least we're just looking around to see what we have. The next thing I would do is kind of look for cognitive. So based off of what I just read from the referencing, I would go under cognitive and kind of look around, see what we have. We have cognitive disorder. Actually, I'm going to shut off the non-currents and do this again so that we don't have all that right on the screen. Okay, so we have cognitive function abnormal, disturbance, disorders. We have impairment, slowing, right? Tests. We have lots of different, again, lots of choices. Can I 100% say any of these choices actually fit what's going on? In this instance, I would say from my perspective, no. I don't have enough information available around what's going on. So although we do have all these great terms, especially general terms, right, that maybe that can be blanketed and maybe a term can be coded to, I would still say, I'm not 100% convinced that any of these are the right option, right? What I did know was that the patient did have an inability to work, or was suspended from work, I should say. I just gave away what I was looking for. But they did have a suspension from work. So right here we have impaired workability or inability to work. Either one of those, they're kind of synonymous. And then let's scroll down and see if we have anything else. Work problem. We have work environment, adverse events. Okay, so we're saying, okay, maybe we're getting closer with at least something we can capture here, right? So the inability to work, I say, okay, this one I feel 100% confident that the patient had a suspension from work. So that means that they are unable to work or they have an inability to work, right? So I would say, okay, this one, I'm feeling pretty confident I can say I will capture that with this term. Okay, so moving on, go to the next slide. So I think this was answered, but I'll just open it. We don't have enough information here, very vague. Okay, so I think I'm seeing a trend in what everybody is going to say here, but would you query this term? And if you would, and if you are, say you have a little bit of information around what you would query and you want to share that with people, I think it would be very helpful for people to understand, say, okay, not only would you query, but you would query for this exact reason, or you would ask the site for this, or ask, send a query back with this information. If you would like to share, that's great. And we'll see what people come up with. But I think I'm sensing a trend here from the last poll on if this term would be queried, right? And why. Okay, we would want details. How the patient was incapacitated. Okay, there we go. There's a specific type of query. So, that's something to keep in mind. I would say that's a good place to start. Maybe confirm how the patient was incapacitated or why. Type of incapacitation, right? Okay, very good. So let's see what else people come up with. I'll give a little more time here. And terms like this come up very often where you have some information, but not all the information Oh, let's see here. We got some good responses. Please provide the medical condition or adverse event that caused the incapacitation. Okay, very good. So there's something you can take away in your notes as well. These specific types of queries, how people would handle it. That's a good way to go about, maybe looking at it. Okay, yes, they would query. Debility is an asthenia, so that idea was wrong. Would query to clarify which concept incapacitated refers to, giving some possible examples. I also wouldn't assume incapacitated is mental and would give some physical examples too. So that's great. That's something to keep in mind, right? Because as we went through and we saw, actually, I'll pull it back up real quick, on the slide where we did reference this, it does state that due to physical or mental impairments, but it doesn't, in our term, we don't have either one of those available, mentioned, right? I should say, not available. All right, great. So everybody seems to be, most people, I should say, seem to be on the same page. And this person would query and say, did the patient have any medication that resulted due to fatigue during work? Okay, that's an interesting approach. In this case, I'm not sure I would necessarily query about fatigue, more the incapacitation, which is part of the actual term that we're seeing. Okay, so was this physical, mental, or functional limitation? Okay, very good. That's another query that comes through. You just trying to get more clarification around incapacitation. So very good. I feel like even though we're on the internet, we're on a webinar today together, I feel like we're actually sitting in the classroom discussing this. So this is very nice. Making me feel like looking at an audience and seeing hands raised with all these different choices and thoughts. So this is great. Okay, so what was the suspension from work advised by a physician, or was it self-decided, employer mandated? Okay, so they're more interested in why the person wasn't working and would query around that. Although, I'll give my final suggestions later, but yeah, that's an interesting one that somebody thought of to keep in mind as well. Okay, I'll give a little more time because we kind of spent a little bit of time on this one. All right. So all in all, it does look like almost everyone was on the same page. At the beginning, maybe not. After we did our referencing and kind of broke the term down and kind of looked in the browser, maybe more people did indeed switch to saying, okay, maybe we do need more information around this term. Okay, so with that being said, I will give you my final suggestions. So everyone, great job, who said they would issue a query. Here I wrote, I would issue for clarity around what led to the incapacitation or any signs and symptoms if they don't have clarity around exactly what led to that incapacitation, any signs and symptoms or something that more information around what exactly occurred, right? What happened? Was it mental? Was it physical? We don't know. We did have someone state that in the query, and that is very true. We do not know. Did they have some sort of mental episode? Did they have some sort of physical condition? Did they have another underlying condition that it was present that is not available in the information in this term? So great job, everyone. I would indeed say for this instance, I would not code it to anything. I would definitely issue a query, see what happened. However, I do suggest, as mentioned, we do have one piece that we can indeed code at this time, and I say it would be the suspension in work and code it to the LLT inability to work. So I did see someone said they would query around why was there a suspension in work. I don't necessarily think that that is needed. I think the query should focus more on the incapacitation and around what happened there, any signs and symptoms, underlying conditions, mental versus physical, etc., and get very specific in what you ask the site or whoever you are querying to get the proper information fed back to you. But in this case, the suspension in work, we clearly can see here the incapacitated. They were incapacitated, which led to a suspension in work. So I don't think we need any more information around that piece of the term. So I would 100 with real, I would say we should code that term for sure, without any doubt in being able to code that. So Okay, with that being said, we have reached our last example for the day with a little time to spare. But before we let you all go, I would really like to give you an opportunity. We are going to open it up for questions in a second, but I just want to open this poll because we would like feedback from you. What did you like? Do you have any feedback on how today went? And also, if you have any specific terms that have really been a pain point that maybe Samina and I can look into in the future and use during these presentations, we do take the feedback we receive and we try to give examples based off the feedback that we get. So if you do have something in mind or another genre of type of example you want to see or anything like that, please feel free to respond here, or just any general feedback that you would like to give us in general today. I'm going to keep this open as we finish out the slide deck. Hopefully people start responding soon. Again, I'll keep that open. We'll go back to that in a second. But with that, we're coming to the end of today's presentation, and I just wanted to provide some helpful MSSO contact details for everyone. We did show you the www.medra.org site today to find that web-based browser. If you have any questions for the MSSO, we do have an email. We have a frequently asked questions. We give the links to the browsers multiple times today, so we just wanted to make sure this was all in one location. And as Hannah mentioned, this presentation will be available on our YouTube channel, so you can go back and listen to it. The thing about this presentation and the YouTube channel is that this is a unique presentation that Samina and I create, and anyone who does a Let's Code Together create. So it's not something that will be available, again, the specific examples we used and things like that in the future. So it's always good to have this YouTube reference that you can go in and watch this presentation again and just, get yourself thinking on how certain things can be handled. So with that, let's go back to the feedback before I bring Samina back in. Okay, we are getting some examples, which is great. Okay. Yeah, without sharing. Okay, we'll get this feedback, and we are getting some examples for future Samina, which will be great, right? For us to kind of consider using.
We really appreciate this feedback because it gives us lots of ideas on what are some of the challenges you face in your daily work, and we do try to take these specific examples and use them in our next upcoming session.
Yes. Okay, great. Yeah, we do try to do the MSSO, I should say, tries to do Let's Code Together sessions in multiple time zones and languages as well. So please be sure to check our training website and see what's available. Samina and I believe, right, Samina, we'll be having another one in the fall.
Yes, we will. And you may see some of these suggestions in the next upcoming session.
Yes, that's right. You might want to come back in the fall or whenever we have our next session, and you will probably hopefully see some of these examples incorporated. Yes, and I know sometimes we do get feedback about the giving more time. We are in a webinar, so we can't. Unfortunately, we have to do things, in a specific order in order to get the most information to you all in the time frame. So unfortunately, we don't have like a whole day to do this. Maybe one day we will. If you would like more time on coding examples and more examples, you can always join a face-to-face as well in those classes. We do have one in the US coming up in June in Minneapolis. If anybody is interested, there are some spots available. And in those sessions, I actually will be there in person training for the 2 days. We do have an analysis and a Medra coding one, and I do go through many examples, and we have lots of time to kind of think about it, talk about it, and kind of work through them. So if anybody's interested, that may be a way to learn. And we do offer face-to-face training all over the world in a variety of languages as well. If you're new to Medra and you don't know that or never went to a face-to-face, it might be something to consider. And yes, we do have all types of classes for beginners. And like I said, the face-to-face classes do also help beginners with coding and things like that. So that's great. And Samina, I guess on this note, I would just like to thank you all for joining today. I know it's very hard to take an hour and a half out of your very busy work days to join us, but we appreciate it greatly. And on behalf of myself and Samina, I just want to say thank you so much. We appreciate it, and we hope to see you again soon. And Samina, is there anything you would like to say? Oh, and I forgot to ask, are there any additional questions before we end the
Yes,
session?
we did have one question come in, and they've asked, how do you get to Medra referencing in the Medra browser?
Referencing in the browser. So I'm not sure what they're referring to. Are they referring to
Let
the
me try
points?
to answer that. So I think when in multiple places in the exercises, both Nicole and I pulled up medical references that we use to clarify our medical knowledge around a certain concept. So there is no site per se from the browser. We just used, you can use Google, you can use your subscriptions to various medical references like Merck Manual or UpToDate. So it's your choice. We just happen to use some of our most favorite reference books or reference sites, and we took snapshots and put them for you on the screens. If that's the question on how we got our information for our specific examples, you can use a variety of medical references.
Yes. And see, Samina and I each had different thoughts because that was a very good point. And what I was thinking was they were referring to the references like the points to consider documents. So I just pulled up medra.org. So in case either way, whatever you were considering reference wise, Samina answered the first part. And then if you were thinking about the points to consider, you could come to www.medra.org, click on PTC, and then we have a variety of documents available, the points to consider. We have companion document, we have a data retrieval document, and you can download all of these to your computer and save it. And that's also a reference point that you can use. So these documents are available there. And as Samina mentioned, we don't have referencing in here. We went through and we referenced on the websites and provided it for you today. So that's what I was talking about, maybe having a internal medical dictionary or something like that you use. So Hannah, are there any additional questions available?
That was the only question we've received.
Okay, great. And I see I'm very happy about this. We're getting lots and lots and lots of examples. So this is great. We love getting examples so we can work through them and hopefully provide them to you in the next webinar. Okay, so now with that being said, and me forgetting to ask questions, but now I got the questions and made sure we don't have any additional. Now I'd like to say thank you, and I'll hand it over to Samina for to give her final thoughts for today.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. I'd like to echo Nicole's sentiment. Thank you very much for taking time from your busy schedule to join us. We certainly take your feedback very seriously and certainly will incorporate all of these wonderful examples and challenges that I see that have been submitted. As well, to address someone who said that they'd like beginner examples, I think what we could do in the future is try to intersperse a beginning type of basic coding questions as well as more advanced. So there's a flavor for everyone in the audience. So with that, I think I will say, unless there's any other question that's coming in through the chat, I would like to say goodbye from my end. Hope you join us next time.
Yep, and everybody have a great rest of your week, wherever you are in the world. We will see you soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.